When we think about climate change, our minds usually go to things like melting ice caps, maybe polar bears on shrinking glaciers. But what if the biggest threat isn't just to the environment? What if it's actually a massive threat to our global security? Because the changing climate is creating a whole new kind of frontline, and it's one that's redrawing maps and really shaking the stability of entire nations.
So, what's the connection between a catastrophic storm and, say, national security? I know, it might seem like a bit of a stretch, right? How does a hurricane or a massive blizzard have anything to do with a country's military or its economic stability? Well, that's exactly the question we're diving into. And the link? It's a lot more direct and, frankly, a lot more alarming than you might think.
And this brings us to this really crucial idea called climate security. Basically, it's the understanding that climate change acts as a threat multiplier. So it takes existing problems, things like food shortages or political tension, and it just pours gasoline on the fire. We're talking about strained power grids, damaged infrastructure, and even events that can trigger mass migrations. It creates this whole cascade of security challenges that governments have to deal with.
Now, to really see how this is playing out in the real world, let's take a look at a country that is facing this reality head-on. China, with its huge population and its incredibly long coastline, finds itself right on the front line of this new global challenge. Take a look at this. This wasn't in the snowy north of the country. Nope. This was a series of completely unprecedented blizzards that hit central and southern China back in 2008. I mean, this single weather event affected over 70 million people. It crippled power supplies and led to billions and billions in economic losses. For many, it was a massive wake-up call that extreme weather is, without a doubt, a direct threat to national security.
And the thing is, the threat isn't just coming from one direction. It's like China is fighting a multi-front war against the impacts of climate change. You've got severe water shortages up north, while at the same time, its economic powerhouses, cities like Shanghai and Guangzhou, are being threatened by rising sea levels. On top of that, its ability to feed its massive population is under pressure from heat and pests, and extreme events like droughts are just becoming more and more common. Each one of these is a major security concern all by itself.
But China's response isn't just about playing defense. It's also incredibly proactive. The country is pouring huge amounts of money into science and research to understand and maybe even get ahead of these massive global changes, especially in the most sensitive places on Earth, the poles. And this right here is the Shui Long 2, which translates to Snow Dragon 2. This is so much more than just a ship. It's a really powerful symbol of China's commitment to polar research. For a major global power, understanding the rapid changes happening in the Arctic and Antarctic isn't just some scientific curiosity. It's an absolute strategic necessity. And what makes this vessel a total game changer is its unique capability. It is the only polar research ship on the entire planet that can break through thick ice, whether it's going forwards or backwards. That gives its science teams incredible access and flexibility in some of the most dangerous and harsh environments in the world.
So, this isn't just about doing science for science's sake. The Snow Dragon's mission has a lot of layers. Yeah, it's about collecting vital, first-hand data, but it's also about cementing China's role in polar governance and laying the groundwork for how it's going to plan for resources and the environment in the future. It's a perfect example of science serving a long-term strategic vision for national security.
But while China is making these big strategic moves, the rest of the world is, well, really struggling to agree on a path forward. The challenge of climate change is global, obviously, but the response? Unfortunately, it's deeply divided, and it's created this kind of diplomatic standoff.
And to get why it's so complicated, just look at the top 5 total emitters from back in 2018. You see this mix of both developed and developing nations. And while China is number 1 in total emissions, that number alone doesn't even begin to tell the whole story or explain the debate that has pretty much paralyzed global action. Okay, so this is really the heart of the deadlock. On one side, you have the developed countries. They argue it's unfair for them to make these expensive cuts if large developing nations get a pass, especially when their emissions are growing so fast. But then, on the other side, the less developed countries point out that the developed world is historically responsible for most of the CO2 that's already up in the atmosphere. They say, hey, we have a right to develop our economies, just like you did. And they'll also note that their emissions per person are often still way lower. The argument from the developing world really hinges on this key principle: common but differentiated responsibility. The idea is pretty simple. The common part means, yes, we all have a shared duty to protect the planet. But the differentiated part says, hold on, the countries that contributed the most to the problem over history and who have the most money and technology to fix it should carry a bigger part of the burden. It's an argument that's really rooted in fairness and what's called climate justice.
So, all this leaves us with a pretty stark picture. The science is crystal clear, the security threats are becoming more and more real, and the need for action is incredibly urgent. And yet, the world is still stuck, divided on who should pay, who should cut their emissions, and who should lead the way. As the planet keeps warming, that question, well, it just becomes more critical with every single passing day.